In this video, we're going to go ahead and make some infographics. Let's take a look at the worked data sheet where I tried to answer all of our questions that we set forth in our data interview. So here we see homicides listed by year. Next we see homicide victims by race. I also did by gender. We see there are significantly more male homicide victims than female homicide victims. And I also did by gender, by year, just so we can make some line charts with it. I also broke up ages into age ranges by decades. Took a look at that. You can see that the ages of 20 to 29 are sort of the most deadly ages for homicide victims. We looked at the top cities for homicides. Looked at the top states for homicides. Looked at the disposition rate for the entire data set. Looked at the top cities with unsolved homicides. Looked at the top first names for homicide victims, all just pretty common names, and same with the last names, so nothing really stuck out there. And finally, we pulled out data for Chicago, right? So these are all the homicides that happened in Chicago in our 10-year period. So we were really able to pull out a tremendous amount of information out of this data set that we can use now to make some infographics. So once we've interviewed our data, often the next step is to create a graphics plan or a list of graphics that you might like to create. So here's what we're going to shoot for. We're going to make a bar chart or column chart of homicide victims by year. We're going to make a line chart of homicide victims by gender by year. We'll make a pie chart of homicide victims by race. We'll make a bar chart showing the top 5 cities for unsolved homicides in the U.S. We'll make a quick map showing the top 5 states for homicides in the U.S. And in the next video, I'll show you how to map out all of the homicides in Chicago. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to use a program called Infogram, and I just need to sign in here. Oops, no, thank you. Okay, so let's sign in to Infogram. So Infogram is an online application, and it has a free basic account where you can create up to 10 infographics in your library. There are many programs available online to make infographics. Other ones include one called PictoChart and another one from Quartz called Chart Builder, both of which are quite fine. All of these programs have their advantages and disadvantages. I like Infogram because it has an emphasis on data and spreadsheets as a backend for all of its graphics. It focuses on creating the kind of fact-based charts and graphs and maps that we really consider infographics in journalism. In a professional publishing environment, a templated tool like Infogram would usually not be used. Online and interactive infographics would usually be created using a scripting library like d3.js. Print or static graphics are often created using Adobe Illustrator, which has a built-in charting tool. Okay, so back to Infogram. So when we come to Infogram, we have a number of options. We're going to go ahead and start out by making a chart. And for our first chart, we're going to go ahead and create what they call a column chart, what I might call a bar chart. So we're going to name our project Examining a Decade of Homicides in the United States. And this will also be our headline. So we'll go ahead and create that. And it'll pop up a nice little template for us. So if we look at the Infogram interface here, we can see we're able to choose different themes that will change the way our infographic looks. Lots of different themes here. I tend to like this one. I think we're going to stick with this one for this exercise. We have some information about changing the sizing, changing some information about sharing in the footer. And if we click on the graphic itself, we get a few more options. We have a few setting options, but most importantly, we're able to edit our data. So you can see Infogram gives us a sort of default chart with some default data in it. And the idea is that you just change that to match your own data. So the first graphic we want to make looks at homicides by year in the United States. So this is really our data. We have 10 years worth of data here, and I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste that right out of the spreadsheet. And I can go ahead and modify my spreadsheet here to be reflective of the new data. And so that was really easy, right? And we've created our first graphic. All right, so let's go ahead and add our headline to our graphic here. I want it to be, actually have all of the copy for our graphic saved here just to save us a little bit of time. So we're going to put a nice descriptive headline here, and we'll make it big and we'll make it bold. There we go. Maybe a little bigger. Okay. Next we want to add a little paragraph text that we call chatter that will explain the graphic. So our chatter is going to say, the Washington Post collected data about more than 52,000 criminal homicides in 50 of the largest American cities that occurred between 2007 and 2017. We examined that data below in a series of infographics. Okay, so let's go ahead and add a headline for this specific graphic so that people know what they're looking at. And if we click over here, it'll give us a number of different text options. We'll go ahead and insert what they call a subhead. And it'll put it down there at the bottom, but I can go ahead and just drag that up a little bit. And we're going to call this, let's see what we're going to call this, Homicides by Year 2007 to 2017. Okay, and that's given us a nice little headline to tell people what they're looking at. Okay, and this looks at homicides by year across that decade. We've got a little legend or brief explanation down here, and we don't really need that right now, so we're going to delete it. Okay, so that's our first graphic. And it looks really, really nice, right? An Infogram will allow us to go ahead and keep adding graphics to the same page so we can create a nice graphics package.